Hey, I'm Red, and today we're gonna go over the simple music theory behind Juice WRLD's newest single, Already Dead, and how you can use it to make your own Juice WRLD type melodies. I don't want to waste your time, so let's get into it. Firstly, this song was made in the key of A sharp minor, which means that we have the following chords to play with. Now, Already Dead uses a seemingly complex progression, but don't get discouraged, this is simpler than it looks. This melody is divided into three parts: the chords, the melody, and a counter melody. The chords are a simple ascending arpeggiation of the one chord repeated over and over again. This is the first chord of the scale and it has a feeling of home to it. Chords have different properties depending on which scale degree they will build on top of. In this case, the one has a feeling of home, like I said. You know how in musical pieces it's said they play with tension and release? Well, this is the release. The one is that chord you would use if you needed to end a classical piece, especially if you use the top and counter melodies to build up tension, but I'll get into that later. On top of that, this one chord is played in the first inversion, which means the third note is in the bass. Usually triad chords are built with a root, a third, and a fifth. This would be the root position, and this would be the first inversion. Inversions are used when the chord fits the melody but the notes are either too high or too low. The top melody consists of notes playing in either down or up beats. The down beats are the 1 and 3, and the up beats are the 2 and 4. We separate them because the down beats are more important, more noticeable. Notes placed on the down beats are usually chordal notes, meaning copying the same notes of your chords but in a different octave. And upbeat notes are usually non-chordal notes. We use chordal notes on downbeats because non-chordal notes tend to sound a bit weird on important beats. Here we can see Already Dead starts with a chordal fifth on the first downbeat, but uses a non-chordal on the second. This note is a lower neighbor tone, meaning that it's being used as a passage between this chordal note and this chordal note. I believe the reason this doesn't sound weird is because the more noticeable notes are these and this, not this one. This is simply just being treated as a neighbor tone. Either way, we can see that there's a majority of chordal notes on this top melody. Also, this progression ends on a 7th scale degree in both this 2 and the 4 here. This nods to the fact that this melody is playing with tension and release, because the 7th scale degree, meaning the 7th note of the scale, is just one step away from the tonic, our home. So here you have tension and here release. Lastly, the counter melody just adds a few extra top notes. These notes are placed mainly towards the end of bars 2 and 4 as they are primarily left empty by the chords and top melody. You can see how the one on 2 ends on a 7th scale degree and how the one on 4 ends on a 5-7 harmony. The 7th note of a scale, like I already said, is a great way to lead back to tonic. So these notes are being used to accentuate the tension right before we release it onto the one chord. Now that we know how this melody was made, we can use these tips to make a melody of our own. First, choose a scale. In this case, I'm using the D sharp minor. Now choose a sound. I'll be using the soft piano preset from Labs, which is a free plugin by the way. We pretty much know the chords we're gonna use already because we're basically only gonna use one chord through the whole thing. If you find it too difficult to make this one chord thing work, try a simple 2-chord progression like this. But in my case, I'm gonna try and stick to this one chord thing. So the next thing we want is to do a simple arpeggiation. In this case, I'm gonna stick to Already Dead's descending arpeggio, with this extra copy of the root notes because I like the extra bass. Now, like we discussed a second ago, I'm going to start putting chordal notes on the downbeats and non-chordal notes on the upbeats. You don't have to always follow this, but keep it in mind when creating your own melodies. I'm going to add a chordal third on this downbeat, and on this upbeat, I'm going to add a 2nd scale degree. I'm doing this for 2 reasons. 1, the 2nd scale degree is a non-chordal note which happens to have a lot of dissonance to it, since it's so close to the 1, so that builds tension. And 2, the 2 is a half step away from the third we just used. So if you see the big picture, we're actually using this as a lower neighbor tone, just like in Already Dead. On top of that, I love the creepy feeling using notes half step away from each other gives the melody in the minor scales. I'm sure you heard how it sounds a bit unsettling now. That's mainly because of this lower neighbor tone I added here. And for a bit more flavor, I'm going to add this simple mix of choral and non-choral notes on the upbeats. Since these notes are not on downbeats, they won't be too noticeable, just add a bit of color. And lastly, since this is already sounding kinda evil, let's lean into it by adding this little embellishment up here. In this case, we're also using this small half-step separation to make this sound a bit more evil. Now, since we're leaning towards a darker sounding melody, I'm gonna give you 4 simple standard tricks to make this one as evil as possible. First, render your melody and add that bounce audio file to Fruity Slicer. Now set it to cut on every beat and play with the attack and delay knobs. This will give your melody that sampled sound effect. Here's how it sounds after the effect. And here's before. Two, add the effects on Stable and Imager, which are both free plugins to give your melody a more old sound effect. 3. Add the blue tape stop to it and automate it. Now bounce that and reverse it. This will give your track that hard tape stop intro. 4. Add reverb to the first second of your melody, bounce it and reverse it. This will make your intro sound way smoother. Now that you got all of that, simply add some drums and you're done. This actually took me a bunch of tries because making melodies off of just one chord is pretty hard, so don't get discouraged if you get it wrong the first few tries. If you want to use this melody for free, there's a download link in the description. And if you want to see more music theory videos, there's a bunch already on my channel, and more coming every week. Let me know which song I should do next, and with that said, here's the final beat. See ya.